I'll continue what I was saying. Yeah, so like I was saying, I like bridging the gap between physical health and mental health, right? And I think we're long past overdue of them being two different things. They
Yeah,
are they are now one thing. All right.
yeah,
We're now looking at it in one thing. It's like you can be, you know, number one athlete in the world in your given sport, but depressed as shit, you're not healthy. And vice
yeah,
versa.
of
You could be
course.
happy as hell, yet,
Yeah,
have all these underlying health problems, and obviously you're
yeah,
not healthy. So I
yeah,
like kind of, if you're into imagery, like you picture a box and like this is health and well-being, I'll just like pushing those boundaries and like pushing the walls out a little further, because end of the day, your health and fitness is how you express yourself through life, right? Whether it
yeah,
is mentally through like writing stuff down, like artwork or whatever, or it's, training, or it's whatever it is, like
yeah,
it's all under the same umbrella. And I like a conversation, and I think everything starts with a conversation.
yeah.
um
No, definitely.
and learning from people a lot smarter than me. Like you say, I'm blonde, so I'm not the smartest of human beings.
Nothing wrong with being blonde.
It's the best. We have the most fun.
Well, apparently so. Although I'm a brunette, I reckon I could challenge you in the fun department.
I
So
don't
we'll
know.
see.
I don't know. Nah. So
But yeah, no, I think everything you said is so true, and it's something that still baffles me that people still try to argue that we don't all have mental health,
mm,
because I think people, because they don't have a mental health condition, so they're not depressed or they don't have anxiety, or like, well, they've never experienced those things, should I say,
mm,
they don't think that they have a mental health. Like, well, of course you do. Like, you have a brain, so therefore you have mental health. You may just be one of the lucky people that never personally experiences ill mental health.
mm,
um and I just think it's so often still the case, and this was definitely true of myself, that you don't really consider taking care of your mental health till you get to a crisis point.
oh
Like,
yeah.
until I was told, like, by a psychiatrist, you are mentally ill, I'd never really paid that much attention to my lifestyle, what, like, how much sleep I had, my exercise, like all of these things, which obviously also impact your physical health. But I didn't ever acknowledge the fact that they played such a fundamental part to my mental well-being, and
Mhm.
how not doing those things obviously had a huge I can't speak, contributing factor to then how mentally unwell I became. And receiving like my diagnosis of bipolar disorder was such a line in the sand for me, to be like, right, okay, I've got to start again. I've got to relearn everything, and I've got to decide what I want my life to look like, and what my foundations and my very, very sheer basics are going to be for my self-care. And realizing that that had to be looking after the mental and the physical, which basically meant a complete lifestyle overhaul for me. I had to
Mm.
go from party girl to a girl who liked routine, and essentially overnight. So yeah, it was a big turning point. But I'm still here. I'm like, much, much better than I was. So yeah, I'm definitely an example of how, if you can balance and have a healthy balance of the two, then you can live a much nicer lifestyle, and
Mm.
feel better, and probably look better too. So yeah.
I mean, feel better, look better, right? And vice versa, look better, feel better, all that type of stuff. Like again,
Yeah,
it's
of
like
course.
integrating physical and mental well-being, rather than just like, oh, it's just your health. And what blows my mind is like we can all develop the flu, right?
Yeah,
Or we use COVID, for example. Um, we
yeah.
can all get
Oh,
COVID, right?
dreaded word. Yeah,
Yeah, so we can all get mentally ill. It's the same
yeah.
shit.
And people just seem to think that they're immune because they
Yeah.
don't necessarily know someone who's been open about it. Like, I think people, say that we're a lot more open about our mental health right now. As someone who lives with a mental illness, I don't necessarily always think that's true, because I still think that it's so many people suffer and don't talk about it, because there is still that, like, will people think I'm weak if I say I'm depressed? Will people think I'm crazy if I say that I'm experiencing psychosis, for example? So there are so many people that don't talk about it and don't have the frank conversations about it. So because of that, I think that's why people don't think that it exists, because it doesn't personally affect them, or as far as they're aware, people they know. And I think that's why conversations like this are so vitally important, because it's two people, you know, being honest and open about the fact that those two things are a correlation. You wouldn't be like, I don't have a brain, so therefore if you've got a brain, you therefore have mental health. Like, it's that simple. And it's all a spectrum. Like, you might be perfectly well in your brain all of the time, or you might have periods where it drops low or it goes high, or you might be like me and have very extreme like periods on that spectrum. But we all are somewhere on this mental wellness spectrum. And I think that's something that people need to definitely understand and appreciate. We're definitely much better at it than we were. You're right there, but I think there's still a long way to go. And that's one of the things I love about, like, you know, this podcast, Instagram, like, world where we all have our voices. It's real people sharing their real stories, and that's getting information out there. Like, your friends will listen to this, my friends will listen to this, gosh knows who else, and they might identify in something that either of us is saying and be able to realize that they have work to do on themselves, whether that be physically, whether that be mentally. But don't we all want to be the best versions of ourselves? Like, that's the end goal, right? Surely, for everybody, without an Instagram filter, like feeling like the best version of yourself. So yeah,
I totally agree. And like, you think back to how many conversations have you personally had, and you can also bet like other people have had too, where they turn around and be like, oh, how are you doing? And you're like, yeah, I'm good, or had a good week, or I'm all right. You know, the typical British thing, I'm all right, I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm fine.
And then you think
I'm
to yourself,
right,
I'm like, yeah, I'm fucked. Like, I am not in a good place. Like, you know, you spend 20 hours of the day, or, you know, 15 hours of your waking day, like, just not knowing what you're doing and feeling like you're struggling, sort of thing. Yeah, that 1 hour you're having a conversation with someone, you're like, oh yeah, I'm sound, don't worry about it, like, don't worry about me, type of shit. And you're like, hold on a minute, like, that's like 90%, 95% of my day not doing okay. Like, we've got a problem here.
Yeah, it is so true, because I think, and you hit the nail on the head with the whole British thing. It's like, we don't want to bother anybody else with our problems. So, like, I mean, I'm the queen of like laughing it off. So I'll make a joke about it, or I'll like make a little like self-deprecating remark, like, oh, I'm absolutely fucking shit, but you know, like, whatever, brush it under the carpet. And I still do that as someone who advocates for having positive mental health conversations. But sometimes it's just easier because it is still very much commonplace that nobody wants to have that vulnerability. Like, is it because everybody presents this perfect life and perfect persona, especially people in our generation, you know, 20s and 30s, like social media like generation? We all want to like pretend that we're living this perfect life and everything's great and we're so happy all the time. That one, I feel like people ask me less how I am because they can see a smiley photo on the internet. They believe that's the truth, not actually thinking about delving a little bit deeper and thinking about the story behind that photo. Or sometimes I say to my friends, I actually post on Instagram more when I'm not well, because I'm so stuck in myself, and I'm like, you know, maybe looking for that validation. As much as I hate to admit that, it's real. lots of people like wouldn't admit it, but it is true. So sometimes the more I'm posting and the more I'm looking happy, quote unquote, is the most often the time that I want someone to go, Vairi, are you okay? Like, you know, you don't seem yourself, kind of thing. And I think it is just about normalizing those conversations and being really honest about it. And I know that that's something that I do still struggle with. Like, I had to have a conversation with my work this week because I'm just not coping at all working from home. It's like been very difficult for me, and it's like had a really knock-on effect with my mental health. And it was so hard for me. And I was thinking, like, this is mad, Vairi, because you like speak on the internet, and I'm like interviewed on podcasts and like all these kind of things, and people like, I advocate for having these conversations. But when it came to me being asked how I really was, I was like, I don't know what to say, and got really emotional and was really very vulnerable about it. So yeah, it was tough. So but I had it, and now, you know, the steps are in place, and I can continue using my normal coping mechanisms, but hopefully with additional support from work. And that's the thing, there is help out there, but you don't know about the help and support that's out there until you are really honest and you take that step forward. So yeah.
I really respect you for saying that. You know what I mean? It's definitely the hard thing to come out and say, and especially, you know, to a fucking stranger on a bloody computer screen. So I appreciate it. But now, like, we appreciate our best mates, right? And what's the main reason why I appreciate our best mates? One, because they're going to be there regardless of whatever happens. But two, they're always going to fucking tell us the truth. Like, no matter what, they will be real. So you're like, okay, the people that I hold closest to my heart on every day is people that will just tell me what it is. Yet I don't live your life that way, sort of thing. And you kind of look at it in that perspective, and you're just like, God damn, like, I am literally lying to 90% of the people I see every day and slapping on a clown face. And I'll tell you this because it's easier, right? You know, the easy conversations or the small talk is easier. But then you feel, at least for me, it actually winds me up when people don't have real conversations with me, or when I'll have a real conversation with someone and, you know, you're there for them, blah, 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 and you dive a little deeper and you can tell the unraveling or the unwinding of the coils, helping them out, the de-stressing, blah, blah, blah. And yet they'll just do small talk with yourself, and that fucks me off. And gets to me because I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. Like, you know, I just kind of showed you that I cared about you, and you just basically showed me you don't give two toss, which I appreciate it. But I completely get the whole smacking on the mask and acting like you're fine. Like, there's been, like, you know, as you know, like, I'm a coach, right? I'll stand in front of a class. I have an hour in front of people where their physical and mental well-being is my number one priority. Everything else, Armageddon could happen, but I'm still gonna
you still got to be smiling and counting them, like, you know, counts of 8 or whatever you need to do.
Exactly.
That's I'm not a PT, obviously.
Well, I mean, it's we'll go with that. But I'll go home, like, there's been times where I'll go home and white knuckle it till morning. And you're just like, what the fuck is going on here, man? Like, you know, you've got someone who works for the Ministry of Defense, you've got like teachers, you've got parents, you've got grandparents, you've got people that are professional athletes, you've got these, like, seriously, you know, quote unquote successful, whatever the fuck that is, successful people, like, leaning on you, and then you just go home and you're like, well, you know, you're not happy. And it's crazy.
And not, like, you're not happy, but you don't know how to make yourself happy. Like, and what I think the funniest thing that I found when I started on my, and I hate using like these kind of like phrases because I find them a bit woo-woo for me and a bit hippie, but when I started on my like wellness journey and like tried to decide who I was going to be after I received my diagnosis of bipolar, I found out it was just the most basic of things, like making sure I was getting out and going for a walk and getting fresh air. And then that progressed to running, and then that progressed to like different forms of fitness, like cycling and all that kind of stuff. So all the, you know, everybody says your physical health and your mental health, you know, are intertwined, but yet so many of us won't really act on it. Because I mean, I don't go running because I want to lose weight. I go running because I want that runner's high. When I've finished a run, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just achieved something. Like, I feel amazing. And obviously now my fitness is improving as I'm like going along my journey. That's amazing. And I can see the physical, like I can see the shapes of my legs changing. I can see that my body shape is changing, and that's amazing. But the fundamental reason I took up running was it was a way for me to release those uncomfortable emotions. So when I started to feel agitated or frustrated or filled with anxiety or even depressed, sometimes going for a run, I would make sure I had a slower playlist on, and then that was enough that it would make me able to cry, because the running and the emotions and like the endorphins that it brought up finally like allowed me to feel those feelings. Because I was a person that was so used to just having, like you say, the clown face on. So I've been so used to like masking my feelings. I needed to find something. And I feel like such an idiot, because for so many people listening, they'll probably be like, of course, like exercise is good for your mental health. Like everybody tells you it, but you have to get to, for a start, you have to push through that beginning bit where it doesn't feel good for your mental health. Like at the beginning, when I first started running, I was like, I absolutely bloody hate this. How is this ever going to make me feel good? And I felt like I looked stupid. I felt like my legs were like flailing all around the place, like Phoebe from Friends. I had like no form. I was wearing like rubbish clothes because I didn't want to invest in running clothes, because I didn't feel like I was going to like keep it up kind of thing. But then when I fought through that and got to the point where it started to feel normal, I was like, I get it. Like, I get why people do this. I get why there is a correlation between your physical and your mental health, because on the days where I don't want to go for that run and I go anyway, my body thanks me for it, but my mind thanks me for it even more. Like I sleep better. I feel like my energy's been released in a positive way. It's just so key. So, you know, it is really important to have those conversations, but it's also so important, and again, this is a bit of a woo-woo phrase again, but to love yourself enough to do those things, to invest in your body, invest in like moving your body and like nurturing your mind through exercise, and caring about yourself enough to do that. And in doing those things, I'm then now able to talk about it, because I think the running and the exercise helps me like work through things. And then once I've worked through them in my head, the thoughts I have while I'm running, then I'm like, oh, okay, that's what that means. Now I can go and have a coffee with so-and-so and talk about it. So I think it's so key. Like, I'm not saying that running is going to work for everybody, but find your thing that helps you process those thoughts, those uncomfortable thoughts. And then they're so much easier to talk about. They don't, and once you've spoken about them once, they're not really the elephant in the room anymore. You can keep talking. I think I bore people with the amount I talk about my mental health now. It's like I check in with myself, I check in with my friends. Like that's just the thing I do. But I think, yeah, it's finding a way that's normal for you, and then making it part of a routine. And I hate the R word. Like, I never thought I'd be a person like that had a routine. I hate it. Like, I remember my psychiatrist saying to me, Vairi, you're really going to need to get a routine. And I was like, all right then, it's never going to happen. Like, I was thinking in my head, do you know me? Routine? Like, are you serious? But if I don't follow a routine, it all goes to shit. Like,
I'm exactly the same. I have to do the same shit every morning. I have to read. I have to write a poem. I have to do something on coaching. I have to fucking do this. I have to do it in the same order. If I don't do it in the same order, if I miss one, like I am the most miserable motherfucker for the rest of the day. It's awful.
yeah, no, it's so true. It's so true. And it's crazy. And I think another thing that struck me in like my, again, wellness journey was, why do we stop learning when we leave school, essentially, or when we leave university? Like, it's like this, we all have these completely different chapters of our life, like our 20s and dating people, and then if you get married and you have children and different jobs and different friendship circles, and these are all different chapters of our life that could be such learning opportunities. But there were so many things I'd gone through in my life that I carried and held on to and didn't process, and then was just constantly like angry about them, and I didn't use them as opportunities to learn from and then help others learn from, kind of thing. And I'm not saying everybody wants to go out there and be a life coach, or everybody wants to go out there and, you know, dedicate their life to helping others, but I strongly believe everybody's going to want to help someone they love at one point in their life. So being able to work through things and do that self-development, and whether that be journaling, whether that be reading self-help books, whether it be once in a while watching a YouTube video over something new that you don't know anything about, you don't know how that's then just going to help another person. And I think it's all about improving ourselves, because the more we don't change, the more we're stagnant. And then that's when I think mental health problems can become worse, because when your behavior patterns become stagnant and you don't necessarily have a proper routine, healthy like boundaries, whatever, that's when your like thoughts will start to come into your head. So I think we should be reading like books and doing different things to stimulate our minds, because I so strongly don't believe that we're supposed to just stay the same person that we were born. Like, I have almost had like an evolution 5 or 6 different times, and I think some of the best people in my life that I know are exactly the same. Like, you can't stay the same. You can't keep doing the same things. Like, yes, you have your routine and it works. I have my routine and it works, but that probably won't be the same in 5 years. That will need to change, and that will need to evolve with the different things that happen to me.
Yeah, and our routine allows us to develop and grow, right? And it enables you to be a different person. Like, we are organic, so we end up, you know, growing and then decaying and whatever. So like naturally, we as human beings, we fucking change anyway. So being like set in stone, I know who I am, you know what you want to do for the rest of your life at 18 type bullshit. Like, is that really gonna work out? Like, there's
absolutely not.
Exactly.
Like, I change what I want to do with my life probably every week. I'm 35 and I still don't know.
That's the point. I think the whole secret is, you know, no one has a fucking idea what they're doing. Everyone's bullshitting.
Yeah, fumbling our way through life, making mistakes, hopefully learning from them, but in a lot of cases making the same ones over and over again.
Yeah, I've done
definitely
that
in my
times.
case.
Yeah. Told you I'm blonde. I've definitely done that a fair few times.
Yeah, me too. And I'm not blonde. I've got no excuse.
Yeah, exactly. You got no excuse. Now there's an old African proverb, like that. It says, if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do no harm.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, that's something that I always mentally go back to quite a lot, because I'm like, okay, cool. Like, you know, no matter what goes on outside of the 4 walls of my head, it could be fucking Armageddon, or hell could freeze over, or whatever. If I'm all good inside, I'm fine. Yeah. And then you can, you know, reverse that, right? You could be running through flowers of like strawberry fields like the bloody Beatles. And the next thing you know, like, you're in the deepest, darkest hole you can imagine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
no, I've
self-care.
been there.
Yeah,
Like,
that's self-care
I've
that you're
definitely
talking
been
about.
there.
So important.
And that's the thing. You need to work on what's going on the inside, and that's a continuous thing. Like, I remember listening to a podcast when I was like really unwell. I can't even remember who it was now, but I remember her saying, "Oh, you know, me taking care of my mental health is like my part-time job." And then she was like, "Actually, no, I think it's a full-time job. I do it alongside my full-time job." And I remember when I heard that, I was like, that is so true. Like, especially if you are someone like me that lives with a more complex mental health condition, it is a full-time job. Like, most decisions I make, I have to think, how is this going to affect my mental health? Like, if I have my friend's birthday party on Friday, but then also a work drinks on Saturday, so therefore I'm gonna have no sleep 2 nights in a row, will I be able to be mentally stable on Sunday because I've had no sleep for 2 days? Will this trigger an episode? And I know that sounds like a very like anal, controlled way to live, but I think in order to manage mental illness, mental wellness, you have to have these conversations with yourself. Because, like, going back to your friend analogy, if your friend was gonna, I don't know, go on lots of benders, not look after themselves, not eat properly, not do whatever, you would say to that friend, "Oh, do you really think you should go on that night out? Or do you really think you should be in, like, I don't know, a Pizza Hut, large pizza every day of the week? Do you think you should maybe like join the gym instead of going gambling?" Whatever the case may be, you would have these conversations with your friends, but yet it's a bit weird to have them with yourself and to pull yourself up on those things. And we make allowances for behaviors. And I think it's just so important that you do have a relationship with yourself that would echo the relationship that you have with a friend. Like, when I'm unwell now, but more so when I was more unwell before I managed it better, I used to say things to people that I would never ever even say to myself, things that I would never ever say to my worst enemy. Like, the names I would call myself, the like stories I would tell myself about myself. And one day I caught myself in it, and I was like, Vairi, like, you wouldn't say that to anybody else. But if you're in a, mental health situation, you will say it to yourself, and you've got to stop telling those lies to yourself, and you've got to find a way to break those thoughts. I mean, this conversation today is going like all around the houses, but I think it's just such an important conversation to have. Like, maybe the fact that we've got no structure is a good thing, because it's messages that people, like, they can pick and choose what bit that they need to hear when they're listening to it, I guess.
That's the thing. It's real though, right? It's a fucking real conversation between two people. Like, that's all it is, and
Two
that's
strangers.
all. Yeah, two strangers. There you go. And that's all I wanted the podcast to be, is just a conversation. Like, I think every problem in the world gets fixed from, number one is from a conversation. You can break it down to communicating with, whether it's your significant other or your mates or yourself. Like, it starts with a fucking conversation, right?
Yeah.
Of being, okay, I have my thoughts, you have your thoughts. I'm going to respect your thoughts and vice versa. Let's throw enough shit together and see what comes out, kind of thing. Let's mold the Play-Doh. And like, that's the beauty. Like, it's just two people chatting shit.
Yeah, and I love that. And that's one of the things, like, I tend to mainly listen to independent, like, podcasts like this one, because I just think normally they're pretty much unedited, and it is just tends to be people just sharing their story and sharing their, like, truths. And I think that there's so much, like, that we can learn from that. Like, people being authentic and vulnerable. Like, someone listening to this might not, have your problems or my problems, but they might hear the way that we deal with them and then be like, actually, that really relates to this problem in my life, or this problem in my Auntie Betty's life, whoever it might be. Do you know what I mean? I think it is about just being real and being authentic and us being ourselves, and that message getting across to the right people.
Yeah.
And even if nobody listens it other than me and you, then, you know, it's very therapeutic having these conversations and just being able to talk and being like, do you know what, life's shit sometimes, but we find a way to make it work, and connecting with like-minded people who, you know, feel the same and can give you advice and you can take tips from. I think that's something that is beautiful. Like, God bless the internet for bringing us misfits together. Like, you've got to love it.
Yeah, man. And like, you know, from a selfish point of view, like the amount of legends like yourself I've met through this type of shit, just to like sit down and have a conversation about whatever, and it ends up going on to the fact of like, oh, how'd you take your coffee, or some daft shit like that, you know what I mean? Where it's like, oh no, I've not got I might have a couple of questions where I'm like really interested to find the answer from these people, but I'm not like, oh, so, you know, tell me where you're from, and like, fuck that bullshit. Like, I always,
well, nobody cares. The
no one
beginning
cares.
bit of the introduction of a podcast, I'm always like, right, okay, so you're blowing smoke up their arse, telling them how great they are. Like, oh yes, we've got Fred from blah blah blah, and Fred has got this many awards and that. I'm like, I don't care. I just want to know what Fred thinks about global warming or whatever the topic is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, just like, yeah, having a good conversation, especially right now in lockdown. Like, I've loved podcasts for that exact reason. Like, when I've been alone, like working from home in lockdown, I just put on a podcast, because then I feel like I'll be like joining, I'll be like, yeah, I know what you mean, mate, like, while they're talking. And I just think it's like, essentially you're going out into someone's living room, bedroom, car, whatever, and they can join in the conversation, they can feel part of it. This might go out to someone and just remind them that they're not alone, that you deal with your shit too, I deal with my shit. Like, you know, let's all be real about the fact that life is fucking rotten sometimes, and you have to find your way to push to the surface and to find another reason to wake up tomorrow, because it's not always easy.
It fucking ain't. It fucking ain't. And something that I say all the time, especially within a gym setting, is like our number one job is not anything to do with fitness. It's to make sure people, you know, don't go home and swing themselves from a tree. And people look at me funny, right? They're like, the fuck is wrong with you, mate? I was like, well, if I gave you a list, we'll be here till, you know, next year, but we're gonna brush over that. Be like, well, that's the thing. Like, people come in here for a bit of fucking mental release, so they don't go home and, you know, white knuckle it to the kitchen for the knives or drink themselves into a bloody state or whatever. Like, you know, like, we all go through shit. If people don't want to fucking open up about it, that is fine, but they should feel like they're in an environment where if they wanted to, it's going to be non-judgment.
Yeah, of course. And that is one powerful thing about gyms. I have like quite a lot of male friends that the gym is their therapy. Like, so in lockdown, when the gyms were all closed, they were all falling to pieces because they might not ever or feel comfortable to or have the opportunity to talk to a therapist, talk to someone who really understands. But for them, going to that gym, banging the weights, doing some cardio, releasing that stress, that's the same for them as going to a therapist. I guess it's the same as me when I said I go for a run.
Yep.
And when I'm on that run, it's almost like that gives me the space for my brain to have the thoughts that for the rest of the day I'm pushing them away. So, you know, it's so, exercise is so powerful. Like,
I do the same shit now. I've been weight training 12 years and training for a sport. Well, am I training for a sport now? Yes and no, but training for training's sake rather than not just like, oh, I'm just going to like work out sort of thing for like 16 years, right? And every time I've harnessed some sort of negative emotion. Like every training session, I've cognitively gone through some shit that either happened as a kid or whatever, and I've like opened that box, I've punched that demon in the face, and I've slammed the box shut on it. And every time, every day, and some days I'll just go out, usually a Thursday, which is today for me, because the week's like absolutely ragged me, and I'm like, oh, I've got one more day, let's just get through it, sort of thing. But usually I have like one day a week at least where I'm like, I don't care what I do today, I'm just gonna train for my head.
Yeah,
I want to
that's
feel
me
a little
most
bit
of the time.
There you go. But I just want to feel a little bit of like, it sounds really sadistic, right? But physical pain, because it takes the pain out of you and puts it into your body. And then I sit down and I usually end up writing something out of it. Like I usually end up getting on my phone and I end up getting a poem out of it simply because I've made sense of whatever's going on in my head, which usually doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
No, but if you can bring it to the surface and then get it out onto paper, that there's something so cathartic in that. Like I used to do a lot of poetry when I was younger, don't really so much now, but I am a big advocate for journaling. So if anyone read my journal, it makes no sense, because it tends to just be a sentence that's in my head that I write down and then I just go on from, like waffling for page and pages sometimes. But it is just that something's brought that thought to the surface, and then it needs a space to be released. And it's almost like and you'll probably find the same with poetry, as soon as you've got that pen in your hand or your fingers on the keyboard, it's like they're writing themselves, like, because it's literally, it's not necessarily coming from you, it's coming from that place that needs the healing, coming from that place of trauma or fear or whatever it is, and you're releasing it. And I think that's amazing. And I think more people should advocate for the power of writing. Like, it's another art that I think is lost as we get older. We're told that we need to, write and creative writing and stuff when we're at school, but it's something that I think is so often forgotten as adults.
And it's expression, right? It's expressing stress, emotion, pain, like severe discomfort or severe pain. And like, I think people need the confidence from themselves or from other people to be like, hey, it doesn't matter how fucking dark this goes, just get it on a piece of paper. I've written some things. No one else has to see it. Exactly. Well, I'm the type of bloke who don't give a shit. Simply because I'm like, I want someone to read it and be like, oh my God, I'm going to do something similar for me. I'm not going to show anyone, but they're gonna benefit from it. So I'll take whatever you want to fucking throw at me. Don't really care. But I know one like 12-year-old lad or whatever that's going to be sat in his bedroom somewhere and he's going to create something that's going to help him out. Right?
Yeah.
I'll write something down, right? And people will read it and go, what? That's fucked up. I'm like, yeah. It is. But like, that's just like, pain and stress or whatever, and sometimes it doesn't make sense.
And who hasn't felt pain in their life? Like, let's all be honest, who hasn't had some form of trauma, some form of pain, like something horrendous that they've had to work through? We all have. Nobody goes through life from birth to death without having something that makes them cry, that makes them question who they are, that makes them question their existence. Like, whether or not they want to call that ill mental health or not, that's their choice. But we know the reality. We know that is, their brain constantly reminding them of something they've gone through, or a mental illness or whatever. And it's finding the ways to work through that. And I think people like yourself or me or the many people who advocate for these kind of conversations that are out there on the internet now, it's having that ability to be able to write something or create a video or be on a podcast that when somebody listens to it, they're like, yeah, I know, I felt that, I've been there. And there's something so powerful in that. And I know I've had that moment millions of times, like listening to something, hearing a song, this, like, reading a poem, I'm like, I know exactly how that person felt. I've been there, and it's almost like you're healing through their healing. It's powerful. So well done for being like brave enough to put your thoughts out there like that, because it's not easy, and especially like even harder for men. Like, let's be honest, I think the female mental health space is a lot more friendly and a lot more open and accepted than the males. So to be a guy out there in the field and trying to bring it in the way that you are, I think is amazing.
Yeah, I'm always interested to see someone else's point of view, right? And it's kind of cool that you brought that up, because yeah, it is, you know, male mental health is a problem, but so is mental health in general, let's be honest. But the whole thing of like, I looked at the males, right, and it's always like put this fucking facade on or some shit. And I'm like, first of all, be real. Like, people can see through your bullshit, especially if you're doing it to like attract a lady. Like, they're not daft. They are like the
We
cleverer
can
side.
see through you.
There you go, exactly. Like, you know, if you're a hard motherfucker, they'll be able to see it. Like, if you're putting it on again, they'll be able to see it. So just be real, man. Be you. And on the second thing is like, I don't know where this notion came from, where everyone is expecting to be perfect, but can we just fucking stop it? 'Cause at the end of the day, like, we're organic, right? Like I said before, we're gonna die regardless of what happens. Our body
The only
dies,
thing
right?
that's guaranteed, we're all going to be born, we're all going to die.
We're all gonna die.
Like,
So I'm like,
you don't, what happens in between, there's no guarantee about the rest of that. Like,
exactly. And like, people just frown upon fuck ups. Like, you mess up, oh no, you labeled it this forever sort of thing. Like, geez, like, you know, I can guarantee I've royally fucked up on every occasion many times, and I'm still like learning from it. But does that mean, you know, you're slapped with a label and, oh, you know, you can never do
you're
anything?
this, you're that, you're a failure, whatever. Yeah.
And I think that is big from the male's perspective. But also, I made a point, right, and I made it into a little video. I don't know if it kind of like, you know, sometimes it circulates, sometimes it goes into the black hole that is the internet, and people never see it. But I got a message from someone I used to coach, and also a good mate of mine now, like, and he was like, "Holy shit, you hit the nail on the head." And I was like, if I remember it correctly, I'm paraphrasing myself, of males' aggression comes solely from vulnerability. So if a male is always lashing out, being aggressive, whether it's towards a lady, towards a male, towards himself, or whatever, it's because they're searching for safety, right? They feel like they're vulnerable, or they are not strong enough to help their significant other, their friends, their parents, whatever the fuck it is. They don't feel enough. They feel vulnerable in the time. And like that, putting on a cap, pardon the pun, now of being a bit older, and I think of me being a kid and growing up as a teenager, I was like, holy shit, yeah, like, you feel vulnerable as hell, so your only emotion is to tear people's heads off, which is obviously a destructive path. And I think, yeah, and I mean, being able to acknowledge that, and I also think going to young males, right, and being like, I feel it. I know where this comes from, mate, and it's okay. However way you want to get this out of your head or get this out of your heart or whatever is okay. You know, whether we go to a scrapyard and take a baseball bat and smack an old car to pieces, or you write poetry, or you do sport, or whatever it is, like, being like, okay, we understand you now, like, let's do it. And most of the times, I hate to say this, but most of the times they don't necessarily have that role model growing up, right? That male role model. I love hip hop. I fucking love hip hop, mainly because I can relate to it too. And Tupac said in one of his songs, he said, he never knew for a woman it ain't easy trying to raise a man.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
oh my gosh, that's so true.
You're like, holy shit, you know, you're not gonna know. And the same thing, a man trying to raise a woman, you're not gonna know.
Exactly. We are like the famous book says, like Mars and Venus, like we may as well be from different planets a lot of the time. And yeah, it is true. And I think there are so many women out there with issues because they were daddyless daughters. For the opposite side, a woman can raise a woman, but there's things that a dad needs to teach a daughter, or a male role model, not necessarily even a dad, needs to teach a daughter, and a female role model needs to teach her son. And yeah, it's like where I think a lot of problems stem from in adulthood, if not all, like things that have happened to us in our childhood. And I'm not knocking or disrespecting my parents in any way, shape or form. Obviously that's the conversation I've had with them separately, but of course there's like, you have to think about people's childhoods and what happens in them, and the knock-on effect that then has in adulthood, because you only have to speak to a couple of therapists to realize that that's a real crux of a lot of issues.
And you also like, okay, we'll create these community centers. So I look at it, you know, right, what can we do sort of thing. I'm kind of like your mate. I'm like a doer. I'm like, what do we need to do? And let's just like go do it sort of shit. And you're like, okay, more community centers sort of thing. But again, that has stigma around it, right? Because if you'd have gone to me as a kid and been like, oh, we get you, we understand you, whatever, like basically what I just said. And was like, oh, come to this community center, you get to do whatever you want. I'd have told you to fuck off. And I've been like, I ain't going to no community center. Like, I'm going to knock around on the street sort of thing. Like,
because I'm a badass.
Yeah, whatever was going through my head as a kid. And you just like, it's hard. And that's why I am a huge advocate for training as a kid. I'm like, look, every school needs gym, and every school needs, more specifically, a weight room. And every school needs a state-funded fucking strength and conditioning coach. So one, they learn how to use their bodies. So like injury prevention through sport, right? And also like figuring out what the fuck this thing is that I'm in.
Yeah.
And then also too, like, all right, you've got an hour and a half. Let's get some stress release out.
Yeah, and learning that is a way of doing it, because I mean that could be a whole podcast in itself, in teaching mental health coping strategies to children from a young age, because nobody ever told me how to deal with these uncomfortable emotions. I was labeled as naughty, a drama queen, a liar, like you know, attention seeker, all of these things, when actually if you'd have taken a good hard look at the situation and at my behaviors and the episodes I now know them to be from my illness, you'd have been like, you know what, this is a kid that needs help. But actually nobody identified that. I mean, I was a kid in the 90s. I do believe it's slightly different for kids now, but speaking to my friends who are teachers, there's still no mental health curriculum. They're still not teaching them coping strategies, stress relief things, even simple things like, you know, breathing exercises. I still feel stupid doing them now because there's something that I learned in my 30s. So when someone's like, you know, breathe out your anger, I just feel like I'm some hippie, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to breathe out some anger, I want to have a drink. Like, and it's obviously took me a point getting diagnosed so late in life that I already had a lot of very unhealthy coping strategies, like to have a drink, like to like blow off steam in other ways, like to like spend too much money, have, you know, was in a lot of like very difficult relationships. And all of these things just stemmed from not being able to deal with uncomfortable emotions. So I masked them using the excitement of a new relationship, or like going downtown and getting absolutely off my tree 5 nights a week. Like, and then when you're trying to you've then got a therapist going, right, okay, so when you're in a bad place, you need to breathe and hold that breath for 5 seconds, now release. And I'm like, the only thing I want to hold for 5 seconds and then release is probably a fag. Like, I don't want to, like, that's a cigarette. I don't know if anyone in a different country is listening and thinking I mean something else. So yeah, it's being able to teach children this, just the very basics, because more and more adults have problems with their mental health, so then more and more children are growing up seeing that. I mean, I could talk about this for ages, so stick a fork in me, I'm done. But yeah, I think
you butter because you're on a roll.
That's such a well, ooh, I like that one. I might steal that one. But yeah, I think that although, as we were saying at the start of the call, mental health has come a long way, there's still a hell of a long way to go. Because the people that make the decisions, like the people that write the curriculum and the government and the people that are giving, you know, even the NHS to a certain degree, they understand mental health, but yet the proper provisions I don't think are in place to offer the right kind of support, because most of my coping mechanisms and my strategies are self-taught, from listening to podcasts, from reading books, from speaking to other people and educating myself and building my own community of other people that live with conditions, and we share our stories with each other. But not everybody has the confidence or thought process to do that, and they might just take it as gospel, and when the NHS says this is what you need to do, these are the medications you need to take, you go down that route. They don't think about exercise, they don't think about journaling, they don't think about all these fantastic skills that we've spoken about and said how, you know, for both of us, how they change our life and help us manage some very difficult emotions. So yeah,
it's like putting a plaster on a broken leg, right? And it's more reactive rather than preventative. And I'd be really interested to see like what we would teach in schools. Like, you know, these conversations are amazing, and you know, there's people a lot smarter than you and I that would end up creating a curriculum and, you know, have PhDs coming out their ass and stuff. And I'd be really interested to see where they would see that going. But again, I'm more of a man on the floor type of bloke, and I'd like to just get in front of these kids and just kind of, you know, say it's okay. Like,
that's exactly what I was going to say. I just like, get me into a couple of schools and I'll share my story about overcoming what I had to overcome to feel half okay half of the time. But that's still better than feeling not okay all of the time. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a work in progress. I'm getting stronger every day. I manage my illness better all the time. So yeah, it's, even if I always say with every like Instagram post or podcast I do, if I can help just one person listening to that or reading that, then that's one person that doesn't have to go through the horrific ordeals that I put myself through. And if everybody does that, the mental health space will be a much bigger, more educational, more positive, more powerful one.
Just people helping people, right?
Yeah, they need to use more voices like ours. Experts by experience, you know, is the phrase that they coin, but I'll take that. Like, I'm still alive. I've kept myself alive, despite definitely not wanting to a lot of the time. So if somebody else comes to me and says that that's how they're feeling, then I think I'm probably in a lot of ways just as qualified as a therapist to be able to talk them through that, because I can, for a start, say I've been where you are and it does get better. Yeah. And you know, you need to find your own version of this emergency toolkit. And that's what I always refer to it as, my emergency toolkit, a list of things that I've got that I'm like, yep, if I do that, I'll feel better. If I do that, I'll feel better. If I do that, I'll feel marginally better. And it's knowing what that is for you and creating that, and then knowing when to pull for it, and knowing that when that's too much for you and you need to actually seek help, whether that be from your friend, your family member, a doctor, the therapist, the Samaritans, like whoever it might be, you know, it's realizing that there's a safe space for that too.
And especially with kids, a lot of the time it's like they don't give you the time of day or the respect that you deserve simply because they think you can't relate, right? So if you know, a therapist comes in, or a psychologist or whatever, like psychiatrist, and sits across from them and tells them these strategies or whatever, they're gonna say 2 words: "Fuck you." And I know for a fact I would have said exactly the same thing too, and I probably would have flicked the rubber at him, like, you know, who
or
knows,
worse.
or worse, you know. But if someone, you know, walks in, they're a bit scruffy around the side, they might drop a couple of F-bombs when the teacher's not looking. They just look like an average Joe, and they're just like, oh, okay, like maybe they can relate, sort of thing. I've had it personally where I've coached kids, right, and they've got ADHD, Tourette's, like they've been labeled with everything. They've not come from the greatest of backgrounds. They don't see their dad that much, you know, you name it, sort of thing. They're knocking around with gang members. And I'm like, okay, cool. But you're in the 4 walls of this gym. Like I don't give a shit what you do outside. This is our time, sort of thing. And if you need to talk to me, this should be a place where you feel like you can talk to me, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've been, you know, you develop the relationship, you develop the trust with this kid, and several kids. I worked in a school in Manchester too, so as you can tell, like there's probably a few stories coming out of that institute.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they literally turn around and be like, "Oh, but you know, you don't know because of whatever."
You don't know. You've not walked in my shoes. Yeah.
I was like, "Excuse me, cunt," you know, and I just, you know, tell them a story or whatever. Hey, what? I'm like, yeah, that's it. And they're like, oh my God. And then that's it. You built the trust then. You know, it's relatability, and, you know, it's people sharing stories.
And I think that's the thing. And it goes back to what I said before about the normalizing the conversation around it, normalizing talking about your fuck ups, normalizing talking about it. This doesn't just come down to mental health, because sometimes we don't talk about our fuck ups, and that's what causes the issues. That's what makes them worse. Excuse me, sneeze. That's what makes them worse in our head. And if we can talk about them and, you know, be so open about them, then that then makes a more open and safe environment for others to do the same thing. And I've like you, I've done youth work, and just meeting them where they're at and making them realize I don't know what is up my nose. Thank you. Making them realize that they, you know, they're not the first person that's skipped school, or they're not the first person that's had a fight or done whatever, like, without incriminating myself too much. Having that conversation and just finding a way to work through it. And sometimes it's not even giving them the skills, it's just hearing, you know what, I get it. And it's like, gosh, we've literally covered everything. I feel like we could go on for about 5 hours.
We could, but I need another coffee. No, I'm joking.
Have a part 2.
Yeah, part 2, mate. You're always welcome back on.
Yeah, definitely.
Always
been good to chat.
And I really appreciate your time, and I know it is like super late at night back home.
It's all right, don't worry, I don't mind. I'm going to jump in the bath now, do my self-care, do all the things we spoke about.
Yeah, so practice what you preach and all that bollocks.
Exactly. I've got to try. I'm not always the best at it. I'll tell everyone else what to do, but then sometimes I forget to do it myself. Isn't that like always the case?
I do the same thing. I tell you what, coaches are the worst, especially if you're coaching all day. You know, you're making people physically healthier and happier people, and then that last thing you want to do is work out. The fucking last thing you want to do is be in a gym. And it's like, okay, you have to do some sort of moving, whatever the hell it is, even if it's like yoga or something, like just do some sort of moving. I tell you what, coaches are the worst for that. And I've seen some absolute states as well, but I'm not going to go into that.
For another time.
Yeah, that's when I'm not recording.
Yeah.
Nah, you get in the bath with your rubber duck and your bubbles, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Yeah, it's been so nice to talk to you. Take care.
Thank you very much, boss.
See you later.
See you later.